What happens when the microphone is no longer yours, yet the truth still demands to be heard? The ballroom inside Moran Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta pulsed with anticipation. Bright lights cast long reflections on polished marble floors as hundreds of guests settled into their seats. Every camera, every eye was fixed on the center stage, where two chairs sat facing each other like pieces on a chessboard. One belonged to Shan Hannity, a name that for 2 decades had become synonymous with primetime authority. He entered first in a navy suit so sharp it looked pressed by confidence. His smile held an edge, polished, practiced, untouchable. He waved to the crowd like he owned the hour. In many ways, he did. This was his format, his network, his game. Then Jasmine Crockett walked in. No music. No hand-raising. Dressed in a simple, elegant black suit, she moved like someone who didn't need the room to bend, only to listen. Her posture was composed. Her eyes, scanning, landed softly but firmly on Hannity. There was no hostility in her face, only calm resolve. Across the country, millions tuned in expecting fireworks. They got something else. Not rage, not drama, but something far more dangerous to comfort zones. Truth. What began as a discussion would soon become a reckoning. And when one side came armed with charm, the other came armed with receipts. Shan Hannity leaned back in his chair, the glint in his eye betraying his anticipation. He adjusted his mic with theatrical ease, glanced sideways at the crowd, and flashed a smile that said he already knew how this would end. "Let me begin," he said, pausing for effect, "by welcoming Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who recently suggested that perhaps the media should only be allowed to report what flatters her." Laughter erupted, swelling through the room like a cue, executed perfectly. Hannity didn't wait. He held up a crisp sheet of paper and waved it like a magician revealing his next trick. "Here's what she's given us over the years," he continued, reading aloud selected quotes from Jasmine's past statements, comments on media bias, editorial spin, and the consequences of misinformation. Each one delivered with a grin that turned her words into punchlines. Apparently, he chuckled, "This is how Congresswoman Crockett defines journalism." The crowd roared again, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She sat still, spine straight, hands folded atop a leather folder resting on her lap. Her expression was unreadable, almost serene. The camera moved in tighter, hunting for discomfort, irritation, a crack. Nothing. Hannity pressed on. "Maybe before the Congresswoman gives us a lecture on ethics," he said with mock courtesy, "she should first understand what journalism even is." He looked back toward the audience, soaking in the applause like it was oxygen. The moment was crafted, sharp, clean, and broadcast ready. For Hannity, it wasn't a conversation. It was a performance. Jasmine's presence was meant to sharpen his monologue, nothing more. He tapped his pen once, a subtle cue to the control room. Then he leaned toward Jasmine, voice dipped in performance silk. "Tell me, Congresswoman," he asked, "how exactly do you imagine truth is supposed to survive in a world where you decide which facts make the cut?" That was the pitch. A trap disguised as a question. But Jasmine didn't lean in. She didn't counter. Not yet. She simply stared at him, eyes steady, blinking once. Her silence unnerved the rhythm. Hannity filled the space. "No comment?" he asked. "Interesting." More laughter. Another win. Or so he thought. Across the stage, Jasmine slowly exhaled. She didn't need to interrupt. She knew the power of letting arrogance overextend itself. She reached down not to fight, but to prepare. Her fingers traced the edge of her folder, slow and precise. The camera stayed on her, expecting some emotional recoil. Instead, they captured a woman coiled like a spring, calculating, unshaken. What Hannity didn't realize was that every second she sat still was not submission. It was setup. From the outside, it looked like she was being overwhelmed, but anyone paying close attention would have seen it. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes weren't shifting. Her hand never trembled. She wasn't reacting. She was listening. Hannity turned back to the audience, riffing freely now, confident that the room belonged to him. It's easy to criticize the media, he said, pacing the rhetoric like a seasoned talk show host, especially when you don't have to answer any real questions. But tonight, he said, turning again to Jasmine, you're going to have to. Another laugh. A wave of it. Jasmine finally moved. She reached out, not for the microphone, but for the switch just beneath it. A soft click echoed through the sound system. Crowd fell quiet, just slightly, sensing something had shifted. She didn't speak yet. She opened her folder and removed a single sheet of paper, carefully folded, annotated in blue ink. Her eyes scanned the text for a moment, then lifted, not to the crowd, but to Hannity. That silence, once his weapon, now hung like a question over his head. He shifted slightly. Not much, but enough. She hadn't said a word, and already the rhythm had cracked. For Hannity, the broadcast was a game he had already won. For Jasmine, it was something else entirely. It wasn't just a moment to survive. It was a moment to redefine. She understood what this was. Not a debate, a stage, not a conversation, a test. She didn't come to impress the audience. She came to remind them what the microphone had forgotten to listen to.
I'm not here to defend myself, she continued. I'm here to ask a question that no one on this stage, and very few in this audience, have ever dared to ask out loud. She paused. Who decides what the American people get to believe? Hannity opened his mouth, but Jasmine raised a hand, not rudely, but firmly. You've read my quotes, Mr. Hannity, she said. Now let me read yours. There was a flicker of confusion. This hadn't been cleared in pre-production. Control room chatter spiked. A producer's hand hovered near the cutaway button. But it was too late. Jasmine unfolded a second sheet. The text had highlights, circles, footnotes. On March 2nd, 2017, she began, you said the media's job was, quote, to question everything, except what we already know to be true. Her voice remained calm. Tell me, Mr. Hannity, who gets to define what we already know? Murmurs rustled through the audience. She didn't wait. In 2018, you declared on air that dissenting voices are part of the enemy's playbook, that questioning the government was, quote, unpatriotic in times of crisis. She turned to him. That's not journalism. That's theater dressed as loyalty. Hannity chuckled, reaching for a retort, but Jasmine wasn't done. You want to talk about my record? She said, eyes locked. Let's talk about yours. Talk about the countless where your platform turned accusations into truths, edited footage into proof, and turned speculation into certainty. All before any courtroom, any witness, or any fact had its say. The air thickened. You've called me anti-media, but I'm not against the media. I'm against propaganda posing as information. And I'm especially against people who think holding a microphone makes them immune to accountability. A ripple moved through the audience. Applause, tentative but building, began to emerge, not from the center, but from the edges. Jasmine stood now, slowly, not dramatic, deliberate. I don't fear the questions, she said. I fear a country where we stop asking them. She placed the papers down and took one final glance toward Hannity. I came here because I believe in conversations, she said. But what you're running isn't a conversation. It's a spectacle. She clicked the mic off and walked off stage. No outro music, no wave to the audience, only a stunned room. And a man behind a desk who, for the first time in the hour, didn't know what to say. For 5 full seconds, Shan Hannity didn't speak. That alone said everything. He stared at the now empty chair, one hand frozen above his cue cards, the other adjusting a mic that no longer mattered. Across the ballroom, the silence was no longer respectful. It was thunderous. Producers whispered through earpieces. Camera angles scrambled to find a new focal point. But there was only absence where Jasmine Crockett had been. And absence had never felt louder. Hannity cleared his throat. Well, he said, too late, too forced. That was spirited. The crowd didn't laugh. He turned to camera 2, the fallback shot, and tried again. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice steadier now, you've just witnessed what happens when someone walks away from accountability. He paused, letting the line breathe, but it didn't land. In the back row, someone stood, then another. They weren't walking out in protest, they were leaving in realization. The truth hadn't come from the man with the mic. It had come from the one who gave it back. Outside the Maran Grand Hotel, a different storm brewed. Clips of Jasmine's words were already circulating on social media, uploaded by guests, staff, even security. One TikTok video of her saying, "I don't fear the questions. I fear a country where we stop asking them," had already crossed 2 million views. Hashtags surged. Mic drop moment, Crockett versus Hannity, truth doesn't blink, let her speak. On Capitol Hill, reactions split like tectonic plates. Some colleagues, even those who often opposed her politics, acknowledged her restraint, her precision, her refusal to play the game. Others accused her of grandstanding, of walking away instead of debating like an adult. But it didn't matter, because the conversation had changed, and Jasmine hadn't needed to win the debate. She had rewritten the rules. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Jasmine Crockett watched the replay in silence. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't relishing a moment of victory. She was studying every gesture, every breath, every choice she had made. Her folder sat beside her, still full. She had brought more: facts, statements, data, receipts that could have turned the next hour into a firestorm. But she had chosen not to burn the house down. She had chosen something far rarer: clarity. The phone buzzed. A text from her chief of staff. "Jas, CNN's calling and MSNBC. You were just trending #1 in 10 states. What do you want to do?" She stared at the screen, then typed one word: wait. Not because she was afraid to speak, because she knew the storm she'd started was still gathering, and the next time she picked up a mic, it wouldn't be as a guest. It would be as the one asking the questions. The next morning, Shan Hannity sat in his private green room, watching reruns of his own show. But something was off. Not the footage, the energy. He saw the words leave his mouth, the laughter he once weaponized echo through the ballroom, but it felt hollow, like watching a victory parade for a war that had never been won. The network hadn't called yet. Not formally, but the signs were everywhere. Segments that were supposed to lead today's headlines had been buried beneath Jasmine Crockett's mic drop. Every conservative outlet was scrambling for damage control. Every liberal outlet was painting the night as a cultural shift. But the strangest part, even among Hannity's own viewers, cracks had begun to show. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., something remarkable happened. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, none of whom had ever stood behind Jasmine Crockett before, released a joint statement. "We may disagree with her politics, but last night, Congresswoman Crockett reminded the nation what dignity under pressure looks like. Her composure, her facts, and her silence spoke volumes." By noon, she had received calls from 4 morning shows, 2 late-night hosts, and a senator who once called her too radical for public discourse. Her response remained the same: silence. Not out of fear, out of strategy. Back at the network HQ, a producer entered Hannity's room. She didn't smile. "Corporate wants to review last night's segment. Internal PR is already working with legal," she said. "They're worried about liability." "Liability?" Hannity scoffed. "The quotes you read, the ones you used as punchlines," she said quietly. Turns out one of them was edited out of context. She just released the original clip. She handed him a tablet. The screen showed Jasmine's calm face from a congressional hearing, the full version. In it, she didn't demean the media. She questioned the ethics of selectively edited reporting. And she had receipts. Real ones. "You told the audience she hated journalism," the producer said, but the clip shows she was defending it from misinformation. Hannity stared at the screen, lips parting but unable to form words. Elsewhere, in a quiet cafe, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a former journalist turned activist. No cameras, no handlers, just 2 cups of coffee and a list of names. "Last night changed something," the woman said. "You didn't shout. You didn't spin. You made people sit with the truth. And then you walked away." Jasmine nodded, but walking away, she said, wasn't the end. "What comes next?" the woman asked. Jasmine tapped the table softly. "We hold the mic, not just in interviews, in policy, in legislation, in truth," the woman smiled. "They won't make it easy." Jasmine smiled back, but her eyes didn't blink. They never have. By evening, cable news had flipped the narrative. It wasn't about whether Jasmine Crockett had won the debate. It was about why Shan Hannity hadn't recognized the debate had ended, without him. On a rival network, a host summed it up. "For years, media has confused performance with substance. Last night, someone refused to perform, and somehow, that turned out to be the most powerful act of all." 3 days after the broadcast, the Moran Grand Hotel ballroom was empty again. The cameras were gone, the stage dismantled, the lights dimmed, but something had shifted, not in the room, but in the country. Shan Hannity returned to air that evening with a different tone. Gone was the swagger, the theatrical edge, the punctuated sarcasm. He opened his monologue with a phrase no one expected. Let's talk about context. But the damage had already been done. Clips of Jasmine's takedown were now part of media studies lectures. Journalism schools played her silence as a masterclass in restraint. Activists had turned her line, "Who decides what the American people get to believe?" into a national campaign slogan. And more importantly, the viewers had started asking questions, not just about Hannity, about everyone. At the Capitol, Jasmine Crockett stepped into a committee hearing with more cameras than usual. Not for spectacle, for scrutiny. This time, they weren't there to catch her blinking. They were there to hear what she had to say. The first order of business on the docket? A proposed bipartisan Media Accountability Act, aimed at ensuring televised journalism discloses context, corrects factual misrepresentation, and publishes full transcripts online within 24 hours. It wasn't radical. It was responsible, and it was being authored by the woman who had once sat silent while the world laughed at her, until it stopped. Late that night, Jasmine stood at the edge of the National Mall, Washington lit behind her like a promise half-kept. Her chief of staff joined her, phone in hand. Poll numbers are climbing, independents, first-time voters, even a chunk of former viewers from his network. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were on the horizon, not metaphorically, literally. He thought the mic was his weapon, she said at last, but it was just a mirror. Her chief nodded. So what now? We stop arguing with performances, Jasmine replied. We start dismantling the stage. Somewhere in a quiet studio, a producer reviewed the footage again, this time without editing, without spin, just the raw feed. The moment Jasmine turned off her mic, the moment the crowd held its breath, the moment the truth didn't yell, it waited. And in that silence, something new had been born. Not a scandal, not a soundbite, not a viral clip, but a reckoning.